In medieval monasteries, there was a recognized phase of spiritual development that monks called the second desert. The first desert was the initial period of isolation and discipline that every new monk endured. The stripping away of comfort, routine, attachment. Everyone went through it. It was expected. The second desert came later, sometimes years later. It arrived when a monk's inner development had advanced to the point where he could no longer relate to the community he lived in. He hadn't broken any rules. He hadn't become arrogant or withdrawn by choice. He had simply grown into a version of himself that the structure around him was not built to hold. The monastery's response was formalized. The monk was not punished, but he was moved, sent to a smaller, more isolated cell, given fewer communal obligations. The institution acknowledged what most modern relationships refuse to, that sometimes a person's growth doesn't create conflict because something went wrong. It creates conflict because something went right. And the only honest response is to make room for the distance instead of pretending it isn't there. Nobody gives you that honesty now. What you get instead is the implication that if your growth is creating distance, the growth is the problem. That connection should survive any transformation, and if it doesn't, the failure belongs to the person who changed. This framing is everywhere, in how loyalty is measured, in the unspoken rule that staying the same is love and changing is betrayal. And it's architecturally wrong, because it treats relationships as contracts designed to survive every version of you, when most relationships were built for a specific version. And when that version evolves, the structure either adapts or fractures. There's no third option. Jung understood this. He described individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are beneath the roles layered onto you, as the central task of psychological life. But he was honest about what it costs. Individuation doesn't happen inside a group. It happens against one. The person becoming themselves will inevitably collide with every system they belong to, family, friendships, partnerships, because those systems were calibrated to the old self. The self that laughed at the same things, cared about the same things, wanted the same things. When that self starts dissolving, the people around it don't experience inspiration. They experience instability, and their response is to apply pressure to restore what was there before. This is the part no one warns you about. The people who resist your growth are not your enemies. They are the people who loved you most fluently in your previous form. Your mother who keeps referencing who you were at 22. Your best friend who brings up old stories as if anchoring you to a version that still makes sense to them. Your partner who fell in love with someone whose needs and edges and interior landscape have since shifted in ways they can't fully track. These people are not acting out of malice. They are acting out of loss. A loss they can't articulate because the person they're losing is still standing right in front of them. And that is the cruelest geometry of outgrowing someone. You're not gone. You're right there. But the part of you they bonded to has quietly become uninhabitable, and neither of you has the language for what that means. There's a specific kind of loneliness that lives inside this. It's not the loneliness of being alone. It's the loneliness of being surrounded by people who can only see the version of you that's already passed. You sit at the same table. You hear the same jokes. You nod at the same rhythms of conversation you've nodded at for years. And somewhere between the second sentence and the third, you realize you're performing. Not lying, performing. Running a version of yourself that still fits the room so that the room doesn't have to confront the fact that you no longer do. This performance is exhausting in a way that nothing else is, because it asks you to betray yourself in the name of comfort. Not your comfort, theirs. And every time you do it, the real version of you retreats a little further into a silence that gets harder to come back from. Jung wrote about the persona, the mask a person constructs to navigate social life. He considered it necessary but dangerous, because the longer someone wears the mask, the more likely they are to forget that it isn't their face. What happens when you outgrow your circle is a collision between the persona they know and the self you're becoming. And the people around you will almost always choose the persona, not because they don't care about you, but because the persona is what the relationship was built on. Asking them to meet the real self means asking them to abandon the version of you that made the relationship feel stable. Most people can't do that. Not because they lack love, but because the request itself feels like a threat to something they depend on. So what do you do when you've entered the second desert? First, you stop pathologizing the distance. The ache you feel is not a sign that you've done something wrong. It is the exact sensation of becoming someone your current life wasn't designed to contain. It is supposed to feel like loss, because it is loss. You are losing the ease of fitting seamlessly into rooms that were built for someone else. That ease was real. It was also borrowed, on loan from a version of you that had a shorter reach. Second, you stop performing. Not aggressively. You don't walk into a room and announce that you've changed and everyone needs to deal with it. You just stop editing yourself down. You let the real thought land without translation. You answer honestly when someone asks how you are, instead of giving them the version they can metabolize. Some people will meet you there. Most won't. And the sorting that happens in that moment is the most important information you will receive during this entire phase of your life, because it shows you who was bonded to you and who was bonded to your shape. Third, and this is where it gets quiet, you grieve. Jung described individuation as a kind of death, because in order to become who you are, you must allow who you were to end. And that ending includes the relationships that were built for the person who is ending. You don't have to hate the people you're outgrowing. You don't have to frame them as toxic or small or unworthy of you. That's not what this is. This is two people standing on either side of a change that neither of them asked for, both losing something real, and only one of them able to see it happening. The monks who entered the second desert weren't celebrated for their growth. They were given a smaller room and fewer obligations, which is to say, they were given the loneliness honestly. No one pretended the community could still hold them. No one blamed them for the distance. The institution simply acknowledged that certain kinds of becoming carry a cost that no relationship structure can absorb, and that the most compassionate response to someone who has outgrown their container is not to force them back in, but to let the container go. You are not losing people because you're doing something wrong. You are losing the versions of connection that were designed for a self you've already buried. The next room exists. The people in it exist. But the corridor between where you were and where you're going has no company in it. That's by design. Because the person who walks through it has to be someone who can tolerate being unseen for a while. And that tolerance is the price of becoming someone worth eventually finding.